Hi, good morning, everyone. Happy to have you back on this lovely Saturday, and it's spring, so happy spring. So this morning we'll be diving into decision making and sort of talking about that. This morning we'll spend a lot of time in groups talking through different processes of decision making. Before we're joined by our afternoon speaker, who'll really get into like governance and legal. So yeah, stick with me. But before I start, I just want to say this. So spring is a season of renewal, growth, and transformation. It symbolizes new beginnings as nature awakens, flowers bloom, the trees bud, animals emerge from hibernation. And many cultures and traditions see spring as a time of hope, possibility, and collective renewal. So, just as spring brings fresh starts in nature, collaboration, democratic decision making allow communities to plant new seeds of change, nurture ideas, and grow together. So, I hope you'll hold that with you as we go through this morning. But before we get into things, yep, happy that spring is here. Happy that spring is here too, finally. More sun and more warmth. Before we get into the activities for today, I do have a poll. And so I just want to know from you, which decision-making method have you experienced the most in group settings? So please take a few minutes to answer that poll, and then we'll come back and hear from everyone. Let me know if it's not showing up or if it is showing up. So I'll have that open for a little bit. Right, a little over halfway, so I'll just wait for everyone else to fill out some answers, and then we'll talk about this. So we're at 15, okay, 16, and there's just one more person. I'll probably close it down in a couple of seconds. I just want to give that one person an opportunity to respond. All right, I'm gonna end the poll there. Share results. So this is sort of what came up from the poll with, I know it was multiple choice. And so most folks, because they're sort of being all over the place, but looking like there's a lot more in majority vote, and some more as well in a hierarchy, which would make sense for all of us too. But I'm going to pass it to you just to ask the question, just to have you all respond. We're gonna do stacks, so each person will have an opportunity to respond. If they do not want to talk, feel free to put it in the chat. If you don't want to put it in the chat, you can just say pass, that's fine. Yeah, sort of briefly talking about your experience in decision-making methods. Yeah, so that's the question. This is a chance for everyone to talk so we can hear people's voices. But yeah, go ahead. Starting with Nakara.
What was the question?
Yeah, just elaborating more on the poll question, which was asking what decision method you most use in group methods, or which one you're more familiar with.
Yeah, I feel like just working in nonprofit, primarily you typically have like the executives who kind of make the decisions but want to make you feel like you're a part of the decision making process, but they've typically already come to their decision. And so that's kind of the space that I was coming from in regard to that. I feel like I work alone a lot of the time, and so I'm not necessarily consulting many people for my own decision making process. And yeah, just wanting to learn more of that as we build our collective. So, yeah.
Thank you. I have Scarlett next on my list.
Yeah, so I work in government, and so I feel like it's a mix of a lot of things. Um, you know, sometimes it is kind of like the city manager calls the shots, or the final decision. But then there's a lot of new initiatives, not new, but a lot of initiatives where we have commissions, and so it has to be like a majority vote. Or we have like community engagement input where we kind of have to like all, agree towards the end. So it really like I guess it depends on the space where I'm at or like what the setting is, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that, Scarlett. Just seeing who passed. Okay, Jackie.
I would say from my experience, it's typically majority vote, and it is unfair in a sense when it's pretty close, like let's say 6 to 7 or something, then the other people's voices aren't really heard
Mm-hmm.
when it's done that way. But that's just kind of what I've countered, especially from being like on the Chamber of Commerce. It's all majority vote.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, thanks.
See, pass a pass. So cheapo.
Um, like throughout my career, I would say it's been mostly majority vote. The past, I would say 4 or 5 years, it's been um actually the past like 5 or 6 years, it's been a lot of consensus, and in the past like 3 years, been kind of trying to move into and embody, consent sociocracy. And so, um, I'm in that space now where just me, I'm trying to bring sociocracy into the spaces where I operate and sharing that. So, yeah.
Thank you, cheapo. Next I have Vanessa, and please let me know if I say your name and you passed.
Yeah, so I think during my like nearly 20-year career in the corporate world, I definitely observed a lot of hierarchy, decision making, and then informal leadership would probably be second. But usually the most vocal person was the quote unquote leader. I think they kind of go hand in hand sometime. Since starting our collective, I feel like we have tried all of these at different points in our evolution. And right now we are more focused on that consent-based sociocracy. And we use a method called Fist to Five to allow us to kind of surface the nuance between yes and a no. And that's been working pretty well for us.
Thank you so much, Vanessa. Cynthia. I can circle back to Cynthia if she comes back on. Shania.
Hi. I'm a nonprofit outside of my group, but it is a black led all black organization, and I'm in nonprofit leadership and I'm sorry, consensus as well as consent based is how we try to run it. Uh Outside of like some like extreme decisions that have to be made by leadership, we really try to let everybody in the organization have a say um, in some of the big decisions that we make, which I think I mean, it's great because Black folks, we don't typically get those things. We typically are in organizations where somebody's telling us what we have to do. So consensus and consent based.
Thank you so much. And Nisha. Oh, sorry. Okay, sorry, Nisha, and then Victoria. I'm sorry, I skipped a name, but go ahead, Nisha.
Okay. I can say based on my work experience, I've experienced majority of hierarchy and a blend of I'm just looking at the list. Um, like a blend of hierarchy and I would say also delegated decision making, which is interesting because I've seen that shift happen a little over time because I've worked in social services and there's a lot of advocacy that's done for specifically for the roles that I've been in the past. And the shift that I've noticed is that I was used to leaders and the executives making the decisions, and we just have to kind of go with it. Whereas I started to find my voice in those spaces and I would advocate. And then I started seeing the shift where they would be like wanting our feedback. So that's why I kind of say like that. And I, as far as running my own collective and collaborative, I would like to have more of a consent-based decision-making method where and with like a hybrid. So we're all kind of collectively bringing our ideas together, but and trying to make a decision. But if there's like a strong objection, we want to kind of figure out what is, what that is before we can kind of move forward. Yeah, I feel like I'm still trying to figure out that whole decision making stuff. So that's all I got.
Yeah, thanks. I'm sorry, Victoria.
I didn't even know what order it was, so doesn't even matter. It's so good to see everybody's faces and names. I would say throughout my professional career working with outside entities and even in my time as volunteer or in the church, it has always been hierarchy. It's always been top down. I have been playing with consent and consensus for many years and have started exploring sociocracy 3.0 methodology over the past probably couple years. With the collective, we haven't made any decisions yet. We're still just talking. So being able to bring in some of that consent, as in I am willing to enthusiastically support this decision that we're making, is where everything for me needs to be.
Thank you. And then from the passes, the person I have last on my list is Kat.
Yeah, kind of going on basically what everybody else was saying. For the majority of my career, it's always really been hierarchy. You just kind of, if you're at the bottom of the totem pole, you just kind of do, what you are told to do. You don't really have a say. But I've kind of moved up a little bit in my career, and so now I do see a lot more of a consensus and a majority vote. Um, Kind of like what was said previously, that majority vote sometimes still feels unfair, especially when it's so, so close. It's like you're not hearing nearly half of the people. Um, but yeah, that's kind of where my experiences lie.
Great, thank you so much for sharing. And this is just really helpful to hear too. I feel like we always talk about like North Star being a co-learning space, and I feel like this is one of the ways that shows up because you all have so much experience in how to navigate or create new practices. I'm seeing a lot of thumbs up for the fist to five, and just hearing some of the ways maybe you've been able to navigate different decision-making practices and organizations, etc., and your own decision-making, and also decision-making processes that may have impacted you. So I hope everything that was said today, all the experiences that you have, all the experiences that you've been able to tap into or learn or include in your work will also be reflected in the activities that we do today. And so moving along, and just today's time will really be spent understanding, we'll be really digging into Black cooperative history again in a way, but we'll be talking about different democratic decision-making methods, and engaging in interactive discussion and activities applying those methods. I want to say this is just a few that I pulled together. There are so many more. There is no one size fits all. There may be times where you put two together or three together to make whatever method work for your entity, your organization, your cooperative, your collective, etc. But just recognizing that cooperatives have historically been means of economic empowerment and resistance for Black communities. Understanding how these groups make decisions is key to ensuring longevity and effectiveness. But also this session will really spend time exploring the different decision-making methods and their impacts on Black-led co-ops. So to start, we've done the poll, and so now we're going to move into really some case studies. So I have 4 case studies for you today. So for the whole morning, you'll be in these 4 groups, and you'll stick with these 4 groups just for some continuation. But this morning, we'll be doing a case study of the Colored Farmers Alliance, the Freedom Quilting Bee, the Federation of Southern Cooperative, and Detroit People's Food Co-op. And we'll spend some time, we'll have about 15 minutes in total, so 10 minutes in your groups to sort of read the case study, but then to also determine what kind of decision-making process each group used. And so for this, I have this Google Doc, and this morning we'll be focusing on slides 1 through 5. So like I said, you'll be split into 4 groups, and each of these instructions are also in the slides too. Group 1 will do slide 1, which is the Colored Farmers Alliance. Group 2 will do slide 2, which is the Freedom Quilting Bee. Group 3 will do slide 3, which is the Federation of Southern Cooperatives. And Group 4 will do slide 4, which is the Detroit People's Food Co-op. So this is just to learn from historical/present day Black cooperatives and exploring how the decisions were made. So you'll be in a small group. Each group has a case study. You'll read the short case study together. You may assign a reader if you choose, read by yourselves, and then discuss the following questions. How did the cooperative make decisions? What challenges did they face? Would their decision-making method work in your co-op or collective? And then just be ready to sort of briefly share out when we come back. And so then putting you into 4 groups, and the time now is 10:40, so you'll be back around 10:50. And if we need, I'll also circle groups. And if we need a little bit of, if we need a longer time, then I'll also add time and let the groups know as well. Recreate 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, so there you go. If there are any questions, please let us know as well. But I'm hoping that all the instructions are clear. All right, the rooms are open. How's everyone? Is everyone okay? Thumbs up, thumbs down. Or...
We're good. We're good.
Okay,
I
okay.
shouldn't say we. I'm good. I'm fine.
How was that? How did that go? Just want to have like a very brief, okay, thumbs up. Thank you. Thank you. I was worried. I was like, oh no. We're trying to balance the time. I think one of the things that we heard back from the last survey is that the group breakouts tend to like end very quickly or very abruptly. So just honoring that and trying to balance that out. But yeah, so based on the case studies, what came up for you guys? How did they make decisions? What challenges did they face? Would you employ their decision-making method into your work? Would you include another decision-making method in their work?
I think in my group, one thing that was said was given that some of our co-ops are so small in size of people, it's kind of like for one of our scenarios, it was a majority vote, and it doesn't really make sense when there's like two people in your co-op at the time to do a majority vote. But for definitely larger organizations, it makes sense that it could be a majority vote or a different method.
So instead of the majority vote for a two-person co-op, then what would you like to practice instead?
What would I like to practice for a two-person one? Is that the question?
Yes.
So I was saying more like consensus probably, or am I using the right word? Yeah, like coming together to like figuring it out until we both feel comfortable in, whatever decision it is, and then moving forward.
Yeah. Thanks, Scarlett. Any other reflections from the case studies?
In our, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, I was in the group with Scarlett too. We had group one, the Colored Farmers Alliance. We thought it was interesting that um, actually we had enough time to read the other slides. That's what I was gonna say. I was gonna speak up on the other slide, but um, just to kind of bounce back off of what Scarlett was saying, as far as having smaller collaboratives or collectives, the majority vote that was used in their practice probably wouldn't be the best for the smaller co-ops or collaboratives. But I said that I believe what kind of works for me too was finding like a hybrid method where as if there might be some time constraints on some of the decisions that need to be made, that at some point someone has to make like an executive decision, but kind of like also wanting to include everyone and make it more inclusive. So like a hybrid of consensus and I would say um, informal leadership or hierarchy. Just kind of, again, just kind of finding what makes sense. Because I was talking about how I have initiatives in programming, but so making decisions on like how whether we're gonna roll out a new initiative could be a different type of method versus something about the structure, like compensation structure or something like that. Like so, those decision making methods might have to um align with the purpose of like what type of outcome are we looking for, are there time constraints, are there whatever the case might be. So
For sure, absolutely. I'll take a final reflection and then move into the last portion.
So what's come up for me is that there is a lot of unlearning, unpracticing, unjustifying what it is that we do and how it might look different than what has been traditionally taught to us in our Western society as how do we get things done together. And so figuring out how do we actually get things done together is something that is super slow. And that it takes more time than a lot of us might believe that we have. Yet what I'm discovering in my practice and way of being is that getting to that point where there is like joyful, cheerful, happy consent and support of this thing, whatever that thing is time well spent.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I was also going to add, it takes a lot of trust too to do this.
That's the conversation we were having in our group too, is you move at the speed of trust.
Yeah.
And that takes time.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you all for sharing. I'm gonna ask Liana if I could have until 11:20. Is that possible? Yeah, okay. Thank you. Okay, so we're gonna move into a practice-based space now. And so in the same doc, I have 4 different scenarios. I have a childcare cooperative. Oh, that's the 4th one. What's the first one? The first one is a worker-owned grocery store. The second is a Black artist collective. The third is a community land trust. And the 4th is a childcare cooperative. And so you, in the same groups that you are in, you'll be spending some time sort of going through the scenario, but using where is it? Sorry. Oh. You'll be using some delegated decision-making methods to make decisions about the scenario at hand. Now, if you do want to get a little more creative and sort of implore or use whatever other decision-making tools, like the fist to 5 or something else, then you're more than welcome to do that. I'm not trying to constrain you to what's available, because I think for the decision making, I have majority vote, consensus, consent-based, and delegated decision making. So if you're gonna look beyond that scope to sort of make a decision about what should happen in this cooperative, you're more than welcome to. But just getting into more of the practice of making these decisions, knowing that you already do decision making in other spaces, but as you're thinking about your cooperative work, how you want to continue to figure out or delegate or make decisions based on your work. And so you'll be in the same groups, same people, but this time we'll have until 11:15 and then come back for a brief reflection. So you'll have until 11:15 with your groups to sort of talk through the decisions. And I'll go through each of the groups too, just to make sure everything's okay and if you need more time. So like I said, the 4 scenarios: worker-owned grocery store, Black artist collective, community land trust, and childcare co-op. And so just discuss the scenario and then discuss how you want to get to a decision about the thing in the scenario based on either majority, consensus, consent, or delegated, or whatever else you'd like to implore or explore in your group to figure out how to make that decision. Is that clear? Is that good? And these
Yeah.
the directions are also in slide 10. All right, back to breakout rooms. So we're not gonna, I'm gonna maybe can I shift into pair shares now or later?
Because we were gonna move into small groups, not pair shares.
Small groups. Okay.
Mhm.
So maybe I'll just ask you all to sort of discuss, well, you can discuss whatever you'd like in the small groups. But some of the discussion questions from this activity include like what stood out for you in terms of like making the decisions. What decision method did you use? And are there any lessons that you want to apply into your own cooperative work? And so that's just a debrief for you all to do in your small group, and then we'll come back. We will have a larger discussion about this morning and this afternoon in the afternoon, like after our speaker comes this afternoon. So please know that I do want to hear your thoughts and what you use to get to what decision. But yeah, I'll move into small groups and I'll pass it to Liana to do this portion.
I was gonna propose we take a 5-minute break. Yeah.
Okay, let's
And
do
then
that.
we can do the small groups. If you want to pop those questions in the chat that you named, that would be great. But yeah, let's take a break. So we'll take a 5-minute break, come back at 28 after, and then we'll move into the small groups. All right. I'll pass it to Nikuli.
All right, yeah. There'll be more time to discuss the questions from the small breakouts at the end of the day. But I know that this morning was a lot of interactive time, so I just want to make sure you have all the time back in the break. But also just wanted to echo once again that there are lots of ways that we come together to make decisions. There is no one size fits all. It's really dependent on the group and what works best for you. Someone mentioned earlier, it's trust-based, it takes time, it takes practice, it takes unlearning and relearning a lot of these methods. But really, you and all your groups really set the tone and experience for how you want to make decisions together. But this also, just wanting to note that this also really talks more into about our next half session this afternoon and our next session the next time, but how decision making comes into like governance and compliance and bylaws, etc. It's a really important piece. But and then which Jillian Hill and will be joining us to talk about that piece this afternoon, but also just talking about like how we hold space together when we make decisions, or if we don't agree on something, or if conflict arises, what happens. So we'll be talking more about conflict resolution, restorative justice practices, transformative justice practices in the next session. So all of this is like building up to something else. I think Leanna and I, we had a resource to share. I can't remember the pages, but in your oh yeah, in your in your folders, there's a book at the very back. It's called Turning Towards Each Other. And in Turning Towards each other, I believe in page 34, there are some more resources on like how to think or talk or explore different decision-making entities. That book actually is, we've used that book at Nexus for multiple things. We've used this for our own transformative restorative justice practice in the organization. There's conflict, there's all types of things in there. But I believe it's on page 34. It talks more about like how you can sort of plan through this, and also like a little worksheet if you're gonna fill that out for your own cooperative entity. So those are the resources I want to share right now. And yeah, this is all building up to our session this afternoon with Julian Hill, who's joining us from Atlanta, and our next session around conflict resolution. So thank you all for sticking with me. And well, yeah, we'll definitely have more discussion this afternoon, just recognizing this morning was really packed and want to make sure you get the break to have enough time to think, reflect, and take a breath before our afternoon session. Anything else, Liana?
No. So we will see you at 15 after. Enjoy the break and take care. For those reactions. Take some more time to settle as we wait for our guest speaker to join us here shortly. All right, welcome back, everyone. Welcome, Julian. That's happy to have you join us at
Hey,
North
hey.
Star. Gonna just briefly introduce you, and then I'll pass it over to you.
Hey,
All right,
Julian.
Chibo, yeah.
Tipo, what up?
All right. So Julian Hill, they is an assistant professor at Georgia State University College of Law. Hill is a teacher, lifelong learner, community organizer, artist, and attorney who knows that the world we deserve, though both possible and necessary, is one for which we must fight with radical love. Hill regularly advises worker cooperatives, collectives, nonprofits, and small businesses on various matters, including formation, governance, compliance, and contracts. They co-facilitated workshops in English and Spanish on worker cooperatives and the solidarity economy with Law for Black Lives, the U.S. Federation of Worker Cooperatives, Democracy at Work Institute, the New York City Network of Worker Cooperatives, and other community-based organizations. Hill served 2 years as a clinical teaching fellow and supervising attorney with the Social Enterprise and Nonprofit Law Clinic at Georgetown University Law Center. Before Georgetown, Hill supervised the capacity building practice at Taproot Justice, a New York City-based nonprofit that uses law, policy, and research to empower grassroots organizing. He transitioned to Taproot Justice after advising Latin American companies in numerous transactions as an associate at Cleary, Gottlieb, Steen, and Hamilton LLP. Raised in Kankakee, Illinois, Hill taught high school Spanish in Compton, California, with Teach for America. That experience inspired them to launch a business called Yo Hablo, which uses hip hop to teach Spanish to youth and adults. Welcome, Julian. We're glad to have you, and pass it over to you. Thank you.
Word,
Welcome.
word. What's going on, everybody? For the people who I can see, good to see y'all. Can y'all hear me okay?
Yep.
Word. All right, I'm in a conference. Actually, it's a conference connected to Yo Hablo stuff. We did a workshop on some stuff we did with some 6th, 7th, 8th graders. So hopefully there's no background noise as I go through this. Is it cool if I share my screen?
Yes, please.
Word. Whoa, this is weird. Oh, I need you to allow Zoom workspace. Okay, this is mine. It's on my end. New computer, y'all. My bad. Just trying to get it together. It's saying I may not be able to record the contents. Okay, I might have to quit and reopen. So let me do that real quick.
All right, no problem.
Leanna, what college is he in? You said assistant professor?
Yeah, I'm at
Georgia.
Georgia State in Atlanta.
Oh, Georgia State. Okay. I didn't know you were still on here, Julian. My bad. I was just asking because I had when after I graduated from high school, I had planned to move to Georgia, apply for Georgia State, Clark, Atlanta, all these different colleges, and didn't even go. I should have went.
You know, it's all good. It's all good. In due time. In due time, if Allah wills, I suppose. So I'm tasked, I believe, today to talk to you all about governance and democratic decision making, with a focus mostly on the governance piece. And I understand y'all had a workshop earlier today around decision making. Is that right? Did I make that up?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, see some head nods. All right, cool. All right, bet. So, as was mentioned before, I teach full time at Georgia State, but I also work with Yo Hablo. LLC is like one of the founders. And so my vision for today was kind of threefold. One is that folks feel more comfortable, to the extent that you don't at the moment, distinguishing questions and issues of governance from management. And then secondly, my hope is that you can at least articulate some of the key questions you need to take into account when it comes to working on your governance documents, bylaws if it's going to be some type of corporation, operating agreement if it's going to be some kind of LLC. And then I want to kind of walk through just some practical process related questions and share some best practices and some resources for folks, whether you are, as I understand it, some of y'all are new and maybe you don't have a legal entity, maybe you don't have governance documents, but it also might be helpful for folks who are already operating, who might want to revisit those documents. So the hope is that it at least a lot of this information is applicable to folks at different stages in their business's life cycle. And there are a couple of resources I'll share after with Leanna to distribute to you all. And then we'll look at a couple websites as well with some things that might be helpful. Does that meet people's expectations or something else someone wants to name as a goal that you wanted to get out of this workshop? And I can see if I can integrate it into what we got going on. Or do people feel like this is kind of covers what you were hoping we would cover? Don't be shy. It's all good.
I feel good about the goals that you mentioned, and also like if anybody has any questions along the way, you know.
Yes. Yes. Questions are welcome. And I, as a facilitator, I will, make some distinctions where it's like, hey, let me hold off on some stuff until a little bit later to make sure I get through the stuff that I need to get through. Cool. And maybe some stuff will come up for y'all as we go through, and that's fine as well. So I typically like to start these questions with these sessions with a check-in. It's a little bit of a large group, so people can just throw something in the chat. Just maybe your name, pronouns. I looked at all your profiles already, but name, pronouns, and maybe what's one thing you are looking forward to learning about today, or what's a question that you have that you still are wrestling through when it comes to governance and decision making. So throw those in the chat at whatever pace feels good for you, and then I'll be taking a look as I move through. And if there's stuff that I can address, I'll make sure that I weave it in. And so this is the proposed agenda. We'll do some governance versus management discussion, and then work through some questions, some process ideas, particularly as it relates to when it might make sense to work with lawyers, with some pre-work that you can do on your own, particularly if you're gonna be working with lawyers, they're gonna charge you money to save yourself a little bit of money. And then some, if we have some time at the end, we'll have some open discussion. I liked a lot of these presentations off also acknowledging the way in which like the law shows up in people's lives in different ways and lawyers as well. And the fact that a lot of this work around cooperatives is not something that our law was pre-designed to make easy. And so I see my role as really, how do we become as informed as we can? How do we mitigate harm as much as we can? Understanding that, this system wasn't designed for us to really be cooperative. It's mostly about exploitation and hierarchy, right? And so we're just gonna work as best as we can, understand that that's the case. And just so you know, that's my positionality, understanding that the law oftentimes is a barrier to the work that we want to do, but we're gonna try to do what we can in spite. Cool. All right. So I see some folks checking in. All right. Cool. All right, this is not legal advice. Educational purposes only. All right, so don't go out here. Julian told me we should. No, I don't want to hear none of that. All right, I'm gonna show them this presentation. I'm gonna show this recording. Be like, I told them cats, man, like this is not what it is. All right. So just keep that in mind. I'm not gonna be able to really delve into probably like a lot of hypotheticals, right? You all aren't, not everyone's in Georgia. Actually, I don't think really anybody is in Georgia. So, and I'm not barred in the places where you all are located. So let's talk first about governance versus management. Anyone here feel like they have a sense of what the difference is? Because I could just skip this section if somebody can just say it and we can just keep it moving. What's the difference between governance and management? And Cheapo, you can't answer because I know you know.
I wasn't gonna say anything.
Okay. Good to see you. Anybody here feel like they know the difference between governance and management? You can throw it in the chat or you can hop off mute. Cool. All good. I'm good with awkward silence, so don't trip. So one of the ways I used to talk about this when I was doing some training in New York is we kind of do like this sort of fire and ice test. And it comes from, I believe it comes from the ICA group, if I'm not mistaken. But the way in which I would kind of think about governance is like things that are like really hot that can, can have a really significant impact, right? Can cause burning down of things, can cause a lot of pressure versus management stuff, which relatively speaking is more, it's a little bit more chill, a little bit more cool. The decisions you're making have a little less of an impact. It's not gonna cause the whole cooperative to go down burning in flames, right? And so one way to think about it is sort of a fire and ice test. And here's some questions you can think about, and then I'll go through another slide that will frame it differently. So some questions, right? Does the decision that we're making have a significant member impact, right? So if most of our members are going to be impacted, right? That's some fire, that's getting hot, people, the tensions is up, right? That's probably a governance decision. If very few members are going to be impacted, let's say it's a particular committee or a particular type of part of your work, it's probably more of a management type question. When it comes to finances, if we're talking about taking out a loan that if we don't pay back is going to potentially cause us to go under, right? And therefore impact a substantial amount of our finances, right? That's typically going to be more of a governance type issue versus a management type issue, right? Where it's maybe a smaller portion of your finances are going to be impacted. Does it have an impact on the character of our actual cooperative, right? Are we talking about, we used to sell, so let me just hold up. So is it Venetia? Is it cool if I call on you?
Yes, this is Venetia.
Venetia, cool. What's the service or product that your cooperative offers?
Offer coaching and consulting services.
All right, boom. So let's say Venetia's chilling with the co-op homies, and then someone's like, yo, why don't we just start doing dog walking services? Well, let's just switch it up, right? And so, yeah, you're changing the whole character of the cooperative, right? What we're doing, like our service, probably the clientele, so on and so forth. That's typically a governance question versus something that is not going to impact the character of the co-op. What's the duration of the impact, right? If it's going to be a long-term impact, typically you're doing governance. If you're talking about something that, again, is going to impact the survival of the co-op, you're typically talking about governance questions. And then if it's about, well, is this person a member or are they not a member? Right? It affects their membership status. Then again, you're probably dealing with questions of governance. Framing it another way, right? When we think about the direction of the cooperative versus the operations of the cooperative, that's a potential distinction, right? What's the mission, for example? Once you're talking about the vision of the cooperative, right? We're talking about governance stuff versus the execution of that vision, right? That's going to be more management. Values versus the policies that are going to be helping us carry out those values. Who are we? Like, what is it that we do? Who are the actual members versus how do we do the work? Is another way to distinguish it. And now we talk about the structure of the organization itself. Like, do we have 5 committees? Do we have sort of a conflict resolution committee? Do we have 2 classes of members versus 3? That's governance. Versus if we're talking about how we structure the work, it's more management. All right. So rest of the presentation is mostly going to focus on governance, but I want to stop there in case people have any questions or confusion around governance versus management, because I think sometimes people get it confused. I just want to make sure we're on the same page.
My thoughts that came up was we just got through talking about decision making in our co-ops, and I'm curious about what decision making looks like for it being a governance thing versus a management thing, and like what parties are involved. Would that be the executive team? Would that be the members? Would that be like a blend of both? Like what all that looks like. And I think that's a real life question that's come up for me in the way I'm operating.
Yeah. Let's talk about it now. So if we're talking about decisions made by, let's say, all of the members. If you have a board of directors structure, right? If it's a corporate entity, maybe you got a board and you got your members. That's typically going to be governance questions, and those are typically going to be in your governance document, right? Your bylaws, your operating agreement. When it comes to, like, let's say, committees and work that's like more operational, oftentimes you might have a provision in your governance document that says, oh yeah, and they can create committees that are going to be delineated based on the decisions of the board or the decisions of the members. Like, you can create committees. You might not necessarily outline a lot of the details around the committees in your governance document, but you can. And so when it comes to, like, cool. Yeah. When it comes to, let's say, we're having our quarterly meeting for all the members, that's governance. If we're talking about, hey, we got a finance circle that's meeting and they're making decisions that eventually have to maybe come up to the board or to the whole membership, or we've delegated certain decisions to that finance circle, right? Like, you can make decisions, let's say, up to $250. If it's spending that much, we're cool. That typically won't rise to like a governance issue that everyone has to be involved in. So you can clarify from your governance document how specific you want the decision-making processes to be at the committee level and lower, but you're typically always going to have something around the members and how you make decisions. What's quorum? What's the voting threshold? How does voting differ depending on the type of decision? So if it's about removing a member, we might want to do that by consensus, or we might want to set us 90% vote versus something more along the lines of, we want to have a vote around whether or not to establish this partnership. Does that answer your question, Venetia?
That does, and that kind of came up in our small group conversations too, where I kind of said that based off of my own experience, it's been like trial and error trying to figure out what decision making looks like. And I have certain bylaws, but I'm still developing those things on the back end because it's like, for me, it's kind of coming as I go, where I'm like, oh, this is a situation where maybe I should only make those decisions with a certain executive group of people within our model, because I have a hybrid model structure. So
Okay.
and that can be a little more complex to talk about right now, but that's kind of what I've been learning through trial and error too. So that makes sense though.
I have a tool for you later. If I don't say something that makes sense to you, remind me.
Thank you.
So, no, of course. Cheapo, anything you want to add? No, I'm messing with you. But if you do got something to add, you can.
No, I just wanted to, yeah, exactly. It's when you look at management, it's really that day-to-day operations. So you can think about it like that. And then, as you said, there's some tools that we're developing with Disconnect as well. So we can probably share those with you as well. When you're talking like the conflict resolution, various like day-to-day things, that's something that I'm actually working with that with NABC and so think about that in relation to the cooperative values. And then anything that you may want to add in your cooperatives and values, other than kind of like the standard cooperative values. That's all.
Cool. And we'll talk a little bit about more. And I have a tool or a template, sorry, for conflict transformation that I've used as a base for a lot of things. So some key questions. And I would say, and we're going to talk about process a little bit later. And I'm going to give you I'm going to send to Liana. I have a governance workbook that I've used to work with different cooperatives with in the past. It was geared toward LLCs, but some of the questions I think are going to be helpful. And so a lot of them are encapsulated in these next two slides. And these are questions, whether it's through a workbook or not, you all should think about before, you should try to think about before you even go see a lawyer. To the extent that you can. And so, because these are all related to governance, I kind of went through as I'm drafting governance documents, what are some of the questions that I'm answering? And so the first is, who are we, right? What's your mission statement? typically you have your mission statement, a governance document. You don't have to have a vision statement. You don't have to have a value statement, but I often will put that stuff in there. With your governance documents, it's important to note, to Venetia's kind of question earlier, the governance document in terms of hierarchy is going to be only after whatever your incorporation document was. So if, let's say you are an LLC, it's your articles of organization. If you're some kind of corporation, it's your certificate of incorporation, whatever. So, well, first off, there's the law. So wherever jurisdiction you're in, they have a whole section around, for corporations, what are the minimum thresholds? What are the minimum requirements? Then you got your articles, right? And so your articles have to be in line with the law. If they're not, then the law trumps. Then you got your governance document, which is your bylaws, whatever. They have to be in line with your articles or your certificate. And typically those certificates or articles are only like 2 pages long. So it's not that deep, right? But because your governance document is still pretty high in the hierarchy, it's going to be above like policies that you might have. Chipo mentioned transfer conflict resolution. You might have policies on, spending for different accounts. You might have some HR related policies. All of those are going to need to be subservient or in alignment and below your governance document. And so your governance document is typically harder to modify. And so to the extent that you want your mission, vision, and values, like you really like, this is who we are, and you want it to be hard to change, you can put those things in your governance document. Again, mission is typically there. Vision, values, I don't see those very often. But again, if those are important, the governance document, you want to think about as something that's not going to change a whole lot and really kind of gives a guide to who we are and what we're trying to do. And the things that we want it to be harder to change. All right. Second key question is, who are our members? Right. So if it's a hybrid institution, are there different classes? Is it worker owners and producer owners? Is it worker owners and consumer owners? Is it just different classes of workers? Right. So clarify, your governance docs are going to clarify who the classes are and also what are the qualifications, right? You got to be 18. You got to have done X or Y, Z type of work. Oftentimes you'll have a probationary period for a co-op, and sometimes you'll have that as like a second class, right? So they might be, class B, just to make it easy. And in order to be class A, you have to have first been a class B member for, let's say, 6 months, whatever the probationary period is. But whatever your process is, you're going to be answering that question. Who are our members? What does membership mean? So then, like, what are your rights as a member? What are the obligations? You might have a situation where you want everyone who's a work owner to have the same rights, right? Makes sense. You might have a situation where you got your full owners and you got your probationary owners who haven't kind of gone through the probationary period yet. You may not want them to have all the rights, right? They might have a half vote, or they might only be able to vote on certain items, but they still are able to get a certain kickback in terms of profit, so on and so forth. And so you want to really lay out what does that mean in terms of if I'm class A versus class B? How do we make decisions is a key question, which we talked about a little bit earlier. When it comes to decision making, there's a lot of different ways in which I've seen people do it. You've got some folks who engage in sociocracy, which I imagine I might have talked about earlier today. But there's, sort of consent. Like, is this kind of good enough to try? You have consensus, right? Where it's like everyone is on board. And if one person isn't with it, we're not moving forward with it. You can do kind of a super majority, like 90%, 85%, 75%, right? Something more than 50. And then you have a majority. And in some jurisdictions, the minimum threshold can actually be lower. But those are just some of the things that I'm sure you already talked about, so I won't talk about it much. Another key question when it comes to governance: what happens when I leave? Right. So if I leave voluntarily, how does repayment work? So typically when people come into a cooperative, they have to pay for their ownership stake, right? And so typically there's an entitlement to get that money back when you leave. Do they get it back immediately? Do we give ourselves like maybe 6 months in case we want to make sure there's no issues with our cash flow, to where if like 20 people want to dip at the same time, we're not giving everybody that money at the same time? So those are some questions you want to answer your governance document. When and how do we meet? Right. So how frequently do we meet? Is it like an annual membership meeting, or do we meet quarterly? Virtual, fine. How do we allocate profits? So typically, if you're hoping to be taxed as a cooperative under subchapter T, have y'all talked about taxes at all, Liana? All right, word. I'm not gonna go into a whole lot of depth, but essentially, corporations typically get taxed in a certain way. LLCs or partnerships get taxed a certain way. Cooperatives get taxed in a third different way, and it's really important, I think, and this has been advice that I get, that in your governance document, you want to have at least what the metric is for how you distribute profits. So oftentimes it might be just based on hours. Sometimes it might be based on income. And for cooperatives, it's important to note the idea is that we're trying to honor people's labor. And so we're trying to figure out what's the metric we're going to use for whether or not Liana did more work than Venetia or Julian, right? And so whatever that metric is, let's say, oh, we do all of our hours, we log them in. So you'll want to put in your governance document, maybe, we allocate profits based on that. It'll also talk about what happens if I get sued and indemnification provisions, which is basically typically that if you're getting sued under the auspices of doing work for the co-op will stand in for you in terms of covering your costs and what have you. Other key questions: what happens if we decide to dissolve? How are the assets allocated? How do we handle disputes? You might have something like initial in your governance document, and then separately have a more laid out conflict resolution policy, which I think folks should really work on in conjunction with working on your governance document, because conflict is going to happen, and the sooner you kind of work on that type of policy, just the better. And so oftentimes I will be working with my clients on their bylaws, or let's say the operating agreement, and we're also kind of working on their conflict transformation policy, right? So that at the very least, we have both of those things done. Your governance document is also going to talk about how do we deal with finances and keeping up with records, and also how do we divide up responsibilities. So I'm gonna pause there. If folks have any questions on that piece around just some key questions, your governance document is going to be answering.
My question was on taxes.
Yeah.
And the income and taxes is, do you think taxes should be done? Essentially next layer down. He said, there's subchapter T and forgot the other subchapter. Do you think as we calculate that, should there be some kind of formula as opposed to like one thing? Because since we're holding cooperative, it is, everyone is in different sectors. And so, the income and revenue by each sector is going to be different. So do you think that we should, come up with a formula that kind of harmonizes, that rate for income so that we can figure out how folks can be taxed?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I've definitely seen different formulas, right? So there might be, a couple of things that brings up. One is it brings up, and this is the thing we're working on in my cooperative, is like, do we want to have like a worker versus producer kind of situation? Because it's the way in which our work is valued is just different, right? So part of it is like, do you want to have different classes? But that's not necessary, right? But that's if the differences are so stark, if there's like maybe two big themes, you might want to think about that. The second thing is that aside, I've seen lots of cooperatives definitely have a formula, and it might be based on percentages, right? So like a certain percentage of it goes based on number of contracts. A certain percentage is allocated based on hours. That's just one way to do it, but you probably want to talk to an accountant.
Yeah.
I'm guessing, particularly one that does work around cooperatives, to get a better sense of just what they've seen. Because I haven't worked on a lot of those myself in terms of actual formulas, but it's definitely very common for sure. Particularly when people have, like you said, kind of different sectors, or their work is just valued differently.
Yeah. Thank you.
No, 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 of course. Any other folks have some thoughts on at least the key questions? Cool. All right. So process. I think it's important. You got to get your mind right first. Got to get your mind right first. And that's because a lot of us are coming from spaces where we've worked in different corporations, different workplaces, or even outside the workplace, have had different types of experience that haven't been great, that have been harmful, that have been traumatic. And people need to, I think, as you go into a cooperative, you need to be very self-aware of what you're bringing. Because I think that's helpful for them being able to build team culture, build team agreements, and understanding how you navigate each other's triggers, right? And so some people got a lot of trauma around money. Some conversations around money are just going to be hard, right? And so acknowledging that and having systems in place to kind of surface those types of conversations, I think are really, really important. But it starts with you. It starts with being self-aware. And I'm working on a piece that I'll share whenever it gets published, probably next month, around healing justice frameworks and what have you, that might be helpful. The thing I think after that, once you kind of have that kind of clarity and it's like, this is what we want to do, we have some shared agreements for how we're going to move through, you have to really budget time. Governance documents, you can do a situation where you kind of, all right, let's get something done to get done, and then let's work on it more. I often find that people don't do that. Let's work on it more later, right? Because once you start getting the money coming in, you got the bank account, the governance stuff kind of goes by the wayside. So I think it's really important to budget time. The way I've done it in the past is typically, I've worked with folks where we just allocate, okay, every 2 weeks or every 4 weeks, right? Once a month, every fourth Sunday at this time, we're going to work on a document. And what would be helpful for you all to be thinking about is working through a bunch of the questions yourself before you go to a worker cooperative attorney. So there's a workbook that I have, and some law firms, including one that I work with, have like a questionnaire that they ask you to fill out so that they can figure out how to draft a document. But at the end of the day, y'all have to answer these questions first, right? The lawyer is going to be able to answer them for you. What the lawyer can help you do, I think, is help clarify confusion that you might have around, okay, well, like, what does this mean? Like, they're asking us this, but I'm not really sure what this means. Or what's the best practice, right? We see these three options. What's the best practice? We're leaning toward this, but does this make sense? Are there blind spots that we might have in terms of why we shouldn't maybe go this way? But in any case, it's really important for you all to have those conversations in the first instance. And then from there, you can kind of develop questions for those open issues. And then when you go to the attorney, you're like, hey, here's this, stuff that we've worked on. We want to kind of connect, and we have some questions around certain things that we felt like we either couldn't understand or just couldn't resolve, right? Maybe we don't have enough understanding or clarity to be able to kind of come to a decision, right? And so what that does is it takes you really, if we want to think about your governance document as like a 10-step process, it really takes you from step 1 to step 5, even before you go to a lawyer, right? So as much as you can advance on the things that don't require an attorney to be involved, I would say to prioritize that. And so for this part, I'm going to come off of this. I'm going to say these things. I'm going to come off of the presentation. I'm going to just show you a bunch of stuff. So I think it's helpful to look at some examples of governance documents. Has anybody here looked at any sample bylaws, operating agreements, or have resources that you've already found around that? So Venetia's nodding her head. Okay. All right, cool. And I'm gonna give y'all some other stuff. Finding a workbook, prioritizing conflicts simultaneously, realize it's an iterative process. I think role plays are very helpful. Me and my business partner for our co-op have been doing a lot of those. And then I think also working with other people around governance is really helpful. So I'm gonna stop sharing real quick. I'm gonna show you a bunch of resources. And these will be in the slides. I'll make the slides available as well. So let me hop off of this. All right, so I'm going to show you a couple things. Anyone here heard of Sustainable Economies Law Center? And seen their they've got a couple cool resources. I'm gonna show you. And I often feel like it's helpful to like show people how I get to stuff versus kind of having it preset. So let me share my screen. All right, can folks see my desktop?
Yes.
All right, bet. So Sustainable Economies Law Center, just Googled it or DuckDuckGo'd it, whatever you want to call it. You go to their resources and you can go to resources for worker cooperatives. Oops. And they've got a bunch of like legal templates here. And so you've got some bylaws here, articles of incorporation, operating agreements. Again, these are for LLCs. And so these would be helpful to take a look at. And I've used some of them. Now, these are based out of California because Suck operates out of California. So just take that into account. But again, I probably wouldn't necessarily start at this process in terms of completing bylaws, but it'll at least give you a sense of like what kind of questions you need to answer, right? And so this would be helpful for that. Then I have, let me show you this. I'm going to show you the work book that I made that I use with some of my clients. And so again, worker cooperative, governance work, but you can change it LLC. And so you see there's a bunch of blanks in here, and these are kind of the main topics. So when do you want this thing to be effective? Mission, values, membership classes. It gives description of different types of membership classes that you might want to consider. One thing of note, if you're trying to have like anything that's kind of like an investor class, it's really important. It's probably more important in that context to really make sure you talk to a lawyer about that, because you can get into issues around securities law. Because typically whenever you're having a business where people have an ownership stake that entitles them to some kind of return, more often than not, there's going to be like a type of security, which we don't have to go into the whole details about. But, there's regulators that want to make sure that people who become owners of businesses or buy shares aren't duped out of their money, right? Because there's a lot of fraud that happens. And so you might have to do certain filings with the SEC, which is the Securities Exchange Commission, or your state equivalent, because usually the state has an agency that's really keen on figuring out securities. And so investor members, community members, like that kind of stuff, you want to just make sure you take a look at. And then this is connected to Venetia, to I think to your question earlier. This says membership matrix, but it's a little bit different. So different membership types, what are their voting rights? Can they be an officer? How are you doing membership shares? Do they make a payment? Can they make multiple payments? Can they
Which
work?
document is that you're
Oh,
talking?
this is a document I'm gonna send to Liana so she can
Oh,
share with y'all. Yeah, y'all don't got this. Yeah, this is hot off the presses. I'm joking. I've had this for a while, but and then the membership process, right? So for the different classes, what's the cost for that share, and then what are the requirements? So you kind of go through for each class. What are the requirements? Can people assign their interest? Typically, you can't. Typically, you have to. If someone leaves, they have to give their share back to the cooperative. So on and so forth. So yeah, whatever. So y'all can take a look at this later. But that's the type of thing that you don't need a lawyer to kind of help you walk through in the first instance, right? So I would encourage you to kind of do that. And then I wanted to show you all Center for Family Life. So this is SOAK. So Center for Family Life has some good resources for worker cooperatives as well. One of the things I use for them is they have a membership manual. A membership manual, you're more getting into the management piece of the work, which is kind of the equivalent. Think of like an employee manual when you go work at some place, or this is the employee manual. A membership manual is kind of equivalent. So you're really talking about the operations. But what I think is helpful from there, where is it at? Cooperative Business Development. They have a guide that can help you think about some of those questions, but also they have a good thing on conflict that I've used several times as kind of a as a jumping off point for a conflict resolution policy. So you can see here. No, leave the door alone. Jessica, did you mean to hop off? Oh, okay. Where? Cool. All right. So no, don't trip. You good. So you got internal stuff, practices, templates for resources, how to set up regular meetings, agendas, facilitation, committees, creating a vision, mission. So some of this stuff could actually be useful for governance. But then they've got this thing on conflict that I usually encourage folks to work through. Except for my computer just froze. All right. Oh yeah, send Cooley through the joint up in there. Great, appreciate you. Yeah, my thing just froze. Sorry about that. And then you got the U.S. Federation of Worker Cooperatives. Have y'all talked about them at all? Their resources? Leanna?
No.
Okay, bet. So U.S. Federation of Worker Cooperatives, they have some guides on here. And actually, Cheapo, some of them speak to patronage. And
Oh, okay,
it's
great.
kind of nuanced in terms of different, like how you might handle more nuanced issues. And so let me see where it's at. So they have this on the mini guides. So if you go to the mini guides,
Oh, great.
and I think I worked on one of them at some point. So they have a startup webinar. So they have some mini guides here. So building your board of directors, building your team, setting membership fees, your structure and decision making, right? And so these are all resources that might be useful to you all. And then there's a decision matrix, which is a super, super helpful tool, Venetia, which I've used in a lot of contexts to basically outline who are the different decision makers. Or no, that's not true. So on the y-axis, you'll put what are all the different decisions that people make, and then figure out who are the decision makers, right? So is it the board, is it the members, is it the specific committee, is it a particular circle? I'm gonna try to pull up this example here. Decision making matrix. Oh, I think it's a okay, paso pues. Anyway, I'll add something to the joint that I sent to Leanna. And actually, Center for Family Life, in their startup guide, they have a decision making matrix as well. And so you could kind of copy and paste. I think they have a Word version of it too. So if you kind of Google it and you want to get a Word version, I think there's a Word version you can get as well. The other place I want to direct you to is Democracy at Work Institute. Have y'all talked about them at all? All right, word. So Dowie, they got some cute resources too. Some of them again I think are connected to governance. So talk about those already. So this pop in. Tools for worker cooperatives. So startups, existing worker cooperatives, conversions aren't super relevant for y'all, I don't think, unless someone's trying to do that. And so these are all PDFs. So you can kind of look for any kind of host of issues. So let's look for something. What am I looking for? So meetings and consensus, right? So different strategies from around decision making. This is another kind of work on a policy handbook when you all get to that point. But then you've got stuff here. So there's a pro forma template, right? If you're kind of thinking about stuff for finance, this is kind of more getting into the nitty gritty. My bad, my bad. So a guide to work cooperative bylaws and operating agreements. So this would be a potentially useful tool for you all as well. Let's take a look at it real quick. I haven't looked at this in a while. Oh, that's not what I'm gonna do. Where's the link to it? Okay. Legal guide. So anyway, I'm not sure why that link isn't working right now, but it's worked in the past. So if you want to do something that's a entity, or you're trying to figure out how to choose your legal entity, 28 questions to ask before being a lawyer. So that would be another tool in addition to what I mentioned that might be helpful for thinking about conversations that you want to have with yourselves before you go see a lawyer. Yeah, so let me see. Can I get that link? Which link you talking about? The Dowie joint? Oh, the 28 questions. Throw this up in here. So that's the link to all the guide, and it has it in there. Okay, so I'm gonna stop sharing that because I wanted to make sure y'all had some tools and resources as well. That was one of the asks. And I'm just gonna go here. Can y'all see the PowerPoint?
Yep.
Bet.
Yeah.
Oh, I forgot. So ICA Group, if you Google them, they've got some resources. They have a good guide on patronage as well, actually, that you could take a look at. NCBA CLUSA, I would say out of the ones here, I found the least useful, but they got a few things on there you might want to check out. And so we can skip this. Yeah, I think that's, yeah. So yeah, so now we can open it up to questions. I think we got 5 minutes.
You have 10, but if you need more
Oh, I got
time,
10.
we're happy. Yeah. So if you want to go back, you can.
No. Like we can let me see. And
Okay.
this is gonna be helpful. Yeah, we could this other stuff. I don't think it's not really connected to governance per se. And so I'll just open up the floor in case I went through that more quickly than I expected. But yeah, any questions, comments, or things that people want to work through a little bit longer in terms of the resources that I shared, happy to do that. Let me show y'all the decision matrix real quick. So I think that might be a good little situation.
So I'm, like, I'm in the conflict and wellness with NABC.
Yep.
And so I'm in that group. And how does how does what we're developing compare with Center for Family?
How does what compare?
How does it compare with the conflict resolution process for with the Institute for Families, I think is.
How does the NABC one compare to the CFL one?
Yes.
Oh, I haven't taken a deep dive into the one, but let's take a look at it. I can just show it to you live. Yeah, let me I don't know why it's being so weird. It's one of the appendices. I think that's why. Ah, found
In
it.
our small group, we're talking it's Mercury and retrograde, so it's gonna be.
Oh, yeah. Wow, this is really weird. Yeah. Let me see. I think I've downloaded it, so let me just pull it up.
Okay.
Any other questions folks have while I'm working on that? Cool.
I don't want to take up space, but as people are like working through their entities or cooperatives, is there like a network of like Black lawyers that people can reach out to? Like, I don't know.
Yeah. I'm
From
sorry I cut you off. I got excited.
Oh, sorry, no. Seeing as we have folks from Minnesota, New Hampshire, Illinois. I mean, I know we have a lawyer on in the cohort, but yeah, is there like a network of Black lawyers if people wanted to connect more and work through some of the items that you mentioned?
Yeah, so there's like a loose network of folks. I don't know. So I know y'all got people, you say you got people in Illinois?
Saying there's a lawyer on the call. I mean,
Oh,
the
gotcha.
cohort, yeah.
Because it's Minnesota, Wisconsin, and what's the other jurisdiction?
Minnesota, Illinois, and New Hampshire.
Oh, yeah, New Hampshire, dog. Yeah, I don't got much for you over there. But what I can say is the Sustainable Economies Law Center does have a database. And so even if you can't find a Black lawyer, there is potentially a how do I put it? A values aligned lawyer that you could potentially find. So Illinois, you said Illinois, do I keep saying Illinois and it's not really actually the case? You said Minnesota, New Hampshire, and where?
In Illinois.
Okay, bet. So do folks know Renee Hatcher out of UIC? So you got her, you got Elizabeth Carter, who I think is still there, if I'm not mistaken. And then you got, I
Yeah.
know Camille. I don't think Camille does any legal work anymore, right? Yeah, I don't think Camille does legal work anymore. But those, she's Black. But those are the only folks who I know in Illinois who do this work, who are Black lawyers. And and they would be the ones who would know better than I would who else is out there. In terms of Minnesota, I don't know a Black lawyer out there doing this work, actually. So I can't speak on that. But I'm trying to find the database for Selk to drop in here, just so you can all have it. Actually, no, that there's a sister. There's a sister who I haven't met her, but there's a sister in Minnesota, I think.
There's Anisha,
Let me.
I don't know if it's Anisha Murphy. I know she went through
Ye-
the Sustainable Economies Law Center, but she focuses on a different type of law. I'm
Oh,
not sure.
okay. Nah, that's who I was talking about.
Okay.
Cause she's on the dang, she's on the joint.
Okay.
So my bad. I got excited again. Do you have access to the data to the database?
I'm on the website looking for it. I was just asking so that I could share this out too, but I'll keep looking.
Yeah, no, there's a link. I just literally got an email where someone had linked it into it. I just gotta find an email. So I'll send that to you as well, Liana. With oh, and so I'm gonna drop the link. It's a Google Doc to the sample membership manual for a worker co-op that has a conflict resolution piece into it. So I just dropped the link, but if you get to page, I think 12, no, not 12. Yes, here we go. To page 15. This is where they talk about it's like their disciplinary policy. And so Cheapo, you can take a look because like I said, I haven't looked closely at NABC's stuff. on this particular print, but it kind of has definitions of like what is misconduct, ladders of consequences, process for of action. Yeah, so that's the section that I would look at.
Okay,
Um,
I'll compare.
yeah, and I forgot to mention, yeah, I'm on the National Association of Black Cooperatives. Member of Malcolm X Grassroots Movement, so free to land. I am a fellow for Sustainable Economies Law Center as well, and I'm a peer guide with the U.S. Federation of Worker Cooperatives as well. So, you know, in a bunch of different places. I'll drop my email in case folks want to reach out. But I think that's my time. I don't want to take up more than was allocated.
Thank you, Julian. Does anyone have any final comments, questions, things they want to lift up? If not, put some gratitude, come off mute, all of that. Thank you again.
Thank you, Julian,
Nah,
for
it's my
especially for the
pleasure.
resources.
Nah, no doubt. You're very welcome. All right. Y'all take care of yourselves. If you
Yep.
need anything,
Thanks,
just let me know.
Julian.
Thank you so
No
much.
doubt.
Thank you.
Ciao,
Peace.
ciao.
Alright. I would be down for a brief break. How are folks feeling? Just to like settle, transition. Great. We can take 5 a little bit. We still have a few more minutes in the room, so because I extended it a little bit.
Oh, okay. I'm gonna
But
pause.
feel free to just relax. All right. So first we have Chipo, if you'd like to share.
Yeah, all of us were really, and I was in the room with Shania and Vanessa, and we were all talking about how we appreciated, the various elements of Julian's, discussion with us, and how, um, I would say for each of us, it is, into the structure, the governance and the management, the management, the operations piece is a piece that we all kind of like step into. And so it's, having the tools, and it's kind of like, okay, this is where we sit and we reside. So we like to do those, we like to do those and set those rules, and be clear on the guidelines that we can use and deploy. Shania, Vanessa, am I missing anything?
I would just say the one other piece that we talked about was that regardless of like what governance we set up and what plans that we make, there always has to be room for that we are all human and we're working with humans. And so we have to remember that we'll put these guidelines in place to help us in our decision making, but there's a flexibility that has to come because we're all human. So
All right. Thank you. Passing it to Cynthia, if you'd like to share. See, you put something in the chat. I like the sites that he put in, especially about taxes. Is there anything else that you would like to add? Okay, I want to be able to understand how for-profit businesses set a tax account, both state and federal. Okay. Um, let's see. It looks like Jessica's not on, so moving to Shanae. If there was anything else you wanted to share.
nope, I shared what I
Okay.
had to share.
All right. Just want to check. Thank you. All right, Vanessa.
Yeah, another thing we talked about was just how helpful it was to have sort of a distinction between governance versus management. I know like in our collective, we've been exploring what kinds of decisions need to go through our consent-based process versus where do we have autonomy to make decisions maybe on our own or with just a couple of us. And it's been really hard to kind of put that into words. And so that um, the images that Julian shared are very helpful. I look forward to bringing that back. Another dynamic we discussed is just how sometimes people are hesitant or resistant to make decisions because they don't want to incur the consequences maybe that sometimes come with making decisions. And so they'll be indecisive and maybe want others to take the lead on that too. And so I think, you know, the consent-based approach is really good at ensuring that everybody has a voice and they have to say clearly where they stand on an issue.
Thank you. All right. Nisha, you'd like to go?
Yes. I'm sorry, I was a little distracted. I'd like to say we kind of shared that we love the obviously the resources that were shared with us and the templates especially. And then we started to go off and talk about our understanding of building these co-ops and what it's starting to look like in real time. Having these certain conversations is just forcing us to have to explore the reality of what we are experiencing. And one of the things that we kind of pointed out is how we are coming together in partnership, but most of us are coming with our own like entity, our own organizations, business ideas, whatever the case might be, and then we have to try to figure out what the co-op actually looks like because it's not my business. Like for instance, Women on Wednesday is not the co-op. It's going to be an arm or an entity or a part of this new structure that we're coming together and building together. So having this information on how to build the bylaws, that's very, very, very important information. But it's like also simultaneously understanding like what does the structure look like? What does our model look like? So still more to explore, but it's great to have these resources.
Thank you. All right, moving along. Brianna, if you'd like to share. Okay, thank you for letting me know. Let's see. Nakara, if you'd like to share as well.
Um, yes and no. Transparently, by this point in the Zoom, I'll just be checked out.
Okay.
It's a lot of hours on Zoom. And so I really want to enjoy it and take in all the information, but I get to feeling very childish and just over it by this point.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
That's all right. Let's see. Victoria, if you'd like to share. And then Lauren, I see that you are back. So if you want to go after Victoria, that's fine as well.
Oh, I love the honesty in that statement about feeling so checked out. And I will say for me, this has been just the totality of the fellowship experience has really, like Nisha said, started to show me what form the co-op will take. Like Onyx Collective is not the co-op. It's going to have some sort of relationship to it, but the co-op itself is is something else. And the conversations that we've been having here that I've had offline with Chipo and other folks have really started to help me see that this is going to be some new creation or entity that is going to support the ultimate goal of, you know, independence and freedom and sustainability, whatever that might look like for Black folks in our community. Period.
Period. Thank you. All right, everyone. We're getting there to the end of our time, so hold on just a little longer. Um, you know me, I'm gonna drop the survey. You don't have to do it now, but want to have some space and time if folks do want to share their thoughts while it's fresh in your mind. Want to hear from you to know how this went, since I was also the first time we had done like that democratic decision-making activity in this space. So appreciate your
Oh,
feedback.
look, so cool.
So we'll take about 5 minutes for folks to fill that out or to just relax and be, and then we'll transition into our closing final announcements. So take another 5 minutes here for the survey. I'm gonna pause the recording. All right, we transition into our final announcements. I'm gonna pass it to you, Nicole.
Yeah, so there's a lot happening, but particularly for North Star, we only have one more official full session like this, which is wild. I don't know how. Anyway, time flies. So we'll be talking about conflict resolution, restorative justice, transformative justice, and also we'll be talking about community engagement practices. And then the session after that is your presentations. Liana sent an email with the presentation document and as well as an email for booking. If you just want to talk to us, check in, ask questions, we're here. Think through ideas, whatever it is, we're here to listen. And so we have this community engagement, restorative justice one, we have presentations, and then finally we have graduation. So in the next few weeks, possibly you'll also be getting an email to inquire about addresses to just make sure that they're still the same, because we'll be doing things like final checks and gifts, etc. So that's upcoming. But yeah, we're almost towards the end. And then other announcements, there's a lot of events happening, which Liana will also share most of those here and also on Zoom. But I just wanted to uplift one that's coming, well, two actually. One that's coming up soon, which I'll also share. This one is virtual. So last year, Nexus turned 20 years. And so this year, we're celebrating our 20 years by hosting different 20th year anniversary programs. And the first being one with a sister program or another program at Nexus called the Boards and Commissions Leadership Institute, which works to train BIPOC folks to be in boards and commissions around the city and state. And Victoria will be one of the speakers for that. So if you'd like to hear more, see more of your cohort members, she'll be there along with another BCLI alum. We'll have our own North Star or Community Wealth Building one in June, and then I think Open Road Fund will happen in October. So we'll share all of this via email. And then I'll also share something else via email, especially once we get more information. But every year there is a really large Black Cooperative Agenda Conference that takes place. That is held by the Network for Developing Conscious Communities. Last year, Nexus had the opportunity to co-host the conference here in St. Paul, and it sounds like this year they'll be in Atlanta. And so once we have some more information about that, we can share out that conference. But it's just a really great space to connect with other Black cooperators, like technical assistance providers from across the states, and just to like really dive more into some of these topics that we're talking about and more. That's where we met Julian last year. And so we've actually even had an opportunity to bring a few of the speakers that we met at the conference. So just a great networking space. So we'll share those and I'll pass it to Liana. But yeah, come check out Victoria on March 27th, 10 a.m. to 12 p.m., amongst other things.
Thank you, Nicole. Want to also plug, we do have one more Black Study session. That'll be Wednesday, April 30th. You all have the calendar invite. But yes, it'll be around self-care and community care with a focus on embodied practices. So we are finalizing the speakers for that. But once that registration link is out, please feel free to share that with your networks. You already have the Zoom link and the invite, but that's for other people outside of the fellows to sign up. So again, that's Wednesday, April 30th, 5 to 7 on Zoom. self-care and community care with a focus on embodied practices. Some other announcements. Tomorrow, March 23rd, there is a conversation called Resist and Build, Atlanta's Legacy of Struggle and Visions for a Just Future, featuring Jessica Gordon-Emhard, the author of Collective Courage, which you all received. She'll be in conversation with organizers in Atlanta as they explore the city's rich history of resistance, collective building, and ongoing fight for justice. That was sent, I think, on Thursday. So that's a free Zoom webinar. You can sign up to join. Just a few other announcements for folks based in Minnesota. Reclaiming Our Own Time route. The Rhythmic Sabbatical Fellowship closes. Application closes on Monday, March 24th, by 11:59. So if you want to apply for that opportunity, you have a few more days to get your application in, and that'll be an opportunity for folks that can't take 3 continuous months off, but want to do still have deep rest experiences. You'll be able to kind of have these monthly weekend experiences to engage in rest and care. So that's been sent. The Open Road Fund has their next community education series called Raise the Roof, which will explore single family home ownership. So that's coming up this Wednesday, March 26th from 6 to 7:30 on Zoom. And all these links have been sent to you. So just check your email because I did send this out, but we can, yeah, you have that sent to you. So you can, that's again another free workshop to sign up for. I think that's all I have. Yeah, I'll pass it back to Nicole for any final things that I missed.
Yeah, if you all have events, whether they're virtual or in person, however, please share them with us. We're happy to share them with the cohort, but also the larger North Star Alumni Network, which has like over 100 people at this point. So yeah, whatever events you have, please share them with us. We're happy to share those out and amplify whatever work you're doing. But yeah, that's all for me. I hope you are all have a restful Saturday. I hope you can get some time to relax, focus, get some rest from the screens. And we'll see you shortly, very soon.
Thank you guys always. We appreciate y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nisha. Thank you, everyone.
Thank y'all so much.
Thank you.
Peace, y'all. Thank you.